Ben Habib is, without question, the most popular right-wing politician on this channel, and he is here now to bring some semblance of sanity. Ben, how are you?
Good evening. Very well, thank you. Lovely to see you. Thank you for that intro. I'm not sure everyone would agree with you, but thank you.
OK, so Howard Cox has quit Reform over the Tommy Robinson thing. Do me a favour, because I think, Ben, that there's loads and loads of people who will watch the Tommy Robinson Oxford Union address and think it is a phenomenal piece of work, that recognise that he is somebody who has first-hand experience of one of his relatives being targeted by a grooming gang, but also is rough round the edges. What should political parties do with him?
So I think there's a propensity, an understandable propensity, for people on our side of the debate to try and sanitize themselves, because we're so used to being accused of being racist or xenophobic or prejudiced at some level, that we try to take a middle road so that the mainstream media and those on the left who seem to hold sway more than channels like talk radio and so on, so that they can't rubbish us. And I think there's a propensity, therefore, to throw some of our own under a bus. I don't know Tommy Robinson. I will not advocate for Tommy Robinson. I will not denounce Tommy Robinson. I would need to know him, examine his cases, and really look into them in depth before I take a view on Tommy Robinson.
My issue with Tommy Robinson is this. I keep hearing people go, oh, do you know about Tommy Robinson? Yes, I know everything about him. Every single criminal conviction has been splashed over every newspaper. Everything he's ever done. The fact that, bizarrely, his occupation is tanning shop owner, which I think is hard to get.
I've got a very good fan.
But I know everything about him, apart from one thing. Is he right? So let me just unpack that, Ben, slightly, because I think there's two levels of is he right. First of all, he centrally contends, first of all, that there is a systematic targeting of white girls in what the Indians call a love jihad, that there is also segregation in schools in Luton, that inter-religious relationships are effectively banned in Luton, that there are no-go areas for white people in Luton. So the first question
Alma Hajaroon, of course, was formed in Luton.
The first question is he telling the truth about Luton? So let's see a study into that. But secondly, and I think the second point is it right to say that that would be symptomatic of the rest of the country? Because what you could say is, well, OK, Luton's had a large amount of immigration, right? So it's whilst that's Tommy's experience, it's not the more general experience. Whether he is a mortgage fraudster, whether he has beaten somebody up at Royal Ascot, whether he is committed immigration fraud or mortgage fraud or anything like that, is not as important as asking the question, is the bloke right?
It's the central point that he's making and has been making for many years. Is that point right? And my own view is that it's increasingly right. And we all see it with our own anecdotal evidence, don't we? When you see these excerpts of these court cases for the gang rape gangs, it's not a whole load of white Anglo-Saxon names that you see. They're from essentially, we all recognise them to be Pakistani names. Now, that's only anecdotal evidence, but there is the Quilliam report from 2017. I don't know if you remember it, but it did an analysis.
83% of gang rapes were by that group. Is he a political prisoner, Tommy Robinson?
So technically, I think he is a political prisoner, because the reason he's in jail, it's very important to unpack this properly.
Well, the Attorney General, I heard you talking about that, who's a political appointment, and he raised
Exactly. Exactly, Ash. So it was the Attorney General who interceded in a civil action. So a civil action, just for those who are listening and aren't familiar with it, is distinct from a criminal action. It was just someone suing Tommy Robinson for defamation. Those kinds of cases typically end with a fine or a penalty. And actually, it was the Attorney General, who was appointed by the Labour Party, who is a Labour politician, decided that because Tommy Robinson showed a film that he was prohibited from selling pursuant to an injunction, that he should have the book thrown at him. And a case was brought, therefore, against Tommy Robinson by a politician.
So that's lawfare, and he's a political prisoner.
But hang on a second.
Yeah. And then he went to court.
Ben, aren't I right in saying, and I'll check up while you're talking, isn't the Attorney General a barrister at Matrix Chambers who represented Anjam Chowdhury, Shamima Begum, and a lot of the people who've attempted to sue Tommy Robinson anyway?
Well, you might have. I can't remember. I don't know that answer, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me because he's a Labour-appointed lawyer into that position. And then, of course, he went to court, and the court didn't fine him, didn't give him a rap on the knuckles, didn't, sentence him to community service, incarcerated him. And, that's pretty...
But he's in solitary as well.
But hang on a second, there's an even more dastardly element of this, because if you look at the Tommy Robinson documentary, right, which he's injuncted from showing, let's just remind ourselves what happened. There was a young man who was who accused Britain of racially discriminating against him, beating him up.
A Syrian guy.
A Syrian refugee. A series of young girls came forward to make some pretty horrendous allegations about him and said that what had happened was a retaliatory attack for his behaviour. He then sued Tommy Robinson. Not 5 people came forward to back up Tommy Robinson's claims. He, in court, brought only his dad. And then the court, by the way, Tommy Robinson had also covertly filmed the head teacher of the school confirming Tommy Robinson's story. The head teacher was not able to go to court because he'd signed an NDA and had been given some compensation. And
I think he lost his job, didn't he, the head teacher?
The council's made everyone sign the NDA.
So all of the people that were on Tommy Robinson's videos were subject to an NDA. 5 people turned up to stand up Tommy Robinson's claim, and the court ruled that it was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and it was impossible to know who was telling the truth, despite the fact that Tommy had 5 witnesses and all this covert recording, and this guy turns up with only his dad, who never even claimed to be there.
So all of that makes perfect sense the way you described it. And we all know, don't we, again, anecdotally, that we live in a criminal justice system that's got 2 tiers.
Yes.
We see it repeatedly. And why we should assume, I'm not suggesting anything to the contrary, but why we should assume that on this one occasion the criminal justice system has acted fairly and Tommy Robinson deserves to be in jail is a peculiar assumption to make, in my view. If we've got
before you go, because I know you're in a real rush, and I really appreciate you coming on.
No, not at all.
I just want you to finish off by this deal with reform. Look, most of the viewers and listeners of this show, there's no point messing about, were disappointed that you were replaced by Richard Tice. I think they accept that members of Parliament need to take priority, but they would have liked to have seen perhaps 2 deputies. Where are you up to? Where is Howard Cox up to? And what do you expect to happen?
So I've got a number of issues with reform, but at the heart of my issues with reform is the fact that Nigel Farage controls it. It's a private limited company. He owns 60% of it, and therefore it is just a one-man band. It's a single point of failure. If Nigel wakes up one morning wanting to do something, everyone's got to do it. And for me, you can't be a proper political party. You can't stand for democracy if you don't have a proper political party where your own members have some democratic voice and there are checks and balances. That's the heart of it. There are other issues which I won't bore listeners with, but I think Nigel is making some mistakes.
Is there no way back that you could ever make up and come back? Maybe if Rupert, what's his name, was the leader instead of Nigel? Rupert Lowe.
That would require Nigel to step aside, and that would be entirely in Nigel's hands because he owns the party. He controls it.
Yeah. And if he didn't, would you then go join, even if he was still leader and he gave up the...
I've always spoken the truth as I see it, and I can't see any circumstances on which Nigel and I would ever work together. I don't
get the impression... I might be wrong, and I know you do have to go, but I don't get the impression...
I can stay if you want me to stay.
Oh, yeah, stay.
I get the impression that you don't hate Nigel Farage. You're not his enemy. You just have serious reservations about the dictatorial way he runs things.
Yeah, I've got nothing against Nigel. Nigel's done great things for this country. We wouldn't have the referendum in 2016. The British people wouldn't have voted to take back control of their own destiny from the EU if it wasn't for Nigel. But there are other things with which I disagree. And one of the, if you want an organisation that's really going to prevail, it can never be on the back of one man. You need, a dozen, 2 dozen great brains, all speaking without fear, all being held to account by their members, you know, good ideas forward, being debated, and then the best ideas turning into policy and being established. And you can't do that if you just have one guy.
But isn't Nigel Farage, in reality, hasn't he been badly burnt by the fact that, I mean, funnily enough, he phoned me today, and I did say to him, look, I think reform's going quite well, simply because, you know, half of the UKIP MEPs were just literally mentally ill, right? So it's all a step forward. But the point I'm making is, Nigel, I think, has always been fearful, or more recently has been fearful, about the fact that there will be some feral person that will cause all sorts of mayhem, because we are the awkward squad, we are the refused nicks, right? We are the difficult ones.
I can't go. I can if you want to, but there are very simple ways to make sure that a party isn't hijacked by a kind of entryist, destabilizing force. There are ways to prevent that from happening. Very easy to do that. But crucially, I believe in the British people, and ultimately, if you believe in the British people being the right. Having the correctly making the decisions, or directing the politicians to make the decisions for the country, you must even make decisions for your own party.
Well, I'm going to ask you one question. I'm not going to attribute it to anybody, although you might guess who said it to me. But I was speaking to somebody who said, could this be Reform's Clause 4 moment, when by castigating Tommy Robinson, they prove that they are moderate right-wingers rather than far-right?
Yeah, I mean, look, Nigel doesn't need to have Tommy Robinson in the party. No one is saying get Tommy Robinson into Reform.
Tommy Robinson doesn't want to join the party, he says.
He doesn't want to join the party. Yeah. That's a red herring. And all Nigel needs to do, can I just give Nigel a bit of advice? If you clip this and send it to Nigel.
Happy to do that.
Oh, he'll be watching.
Nigel, just shut up about Tommy Robinson. No one wants to hear your opinion on Tommy Robinson. It's irrelevant. Tommy Robinson doesn't want you speaking about him, and no one else does. But, you know, if you are going to speak about him in balanced terms. Try and see it from a broader perspective, and don't, incessantly throw the man under a bus.
Do you think he's obsessed with him?
I don't know. I don't know why he talks about him.
Do you think Nigel is a Prime Minister material, or is he a campaigner like Boris? If he becomes leader, will he be a good one?
It's too early to tell. Nigel has never run any organisation.
No.
And even with Reform, he's reluctant to make it into a proper organisation. And that's my point. And if you're running the country, you need a breadth and depth of great people around you. You've got to listen to them. Margaret Thatcher, had fantastic advisors. Down to Maggie. Yeah, she had great advisors. Absolutely.
All men, though. She only liked men, didn't she?
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I've got to be honest with you. I'm gonna leave it there, but I will say one thing, Rupert. Sorry, I'll say one thing. Sorry. I was just thinking.
Habib.
Sorry, Ben. I was just thinking this. This is an awful thing to say, and it's so bitchy. But I was watching Nigel Farage speak in the Westminster Hall debate, and it's really obvious he's doing dry January. Like he doesn't look like he's just woken up anymore. But anyway, that is slightly bitchy. Ben Habib, thank you so much.